So, welcome back. As you are likely aware, there was a pretty significant patch released on January 22nd to address a lot of the issues people were having with the Astra Militarum. I had started going through creating a unit guide, but obviously now they created some pretty significant changes to a lot of the game play for most of the units, so some of those are going to be outdated now, unfortunately. They really made dramatic changes here. So I thought I'd make my way through the patch. As you're aware, the video I did upload yesterday, I was unable to create a new video for it because I've been away the last few days with work. So today I just got back home, so I figured I'd make a video going through this. Going forward, the videos with the units for the unit faction guide will have these changes taken into consideration, so it won't be with outdated information like the one that was released yesterday was. So I'm pretty glad they fixed a lot of the bugs that were known here. It's actually a shocking amount of bugs that were involved with the Astra Militarum, and I'm hoping that they're going to play a little bit better now because they really did make pretty dramatic changes here. So just kind of making my way through kind of the general fixes here. As I said, pretty much every unit in the Astra Militarum roster has had some degree of changes. One thing that was happening that I was noticing is it seems like the momentum gains were not working correctly, or not momentum gains, but the bonuses. And so I wasn't sure, like, because it's a little bit ambiguous with like the grazes and the crits, like, is it working right, is it not? It still seems like even after I was getting units with a lot of momentum, they seem to be still grazing a whole lot, and it looks like that was actually a known issue here. So they think they have fixed that, so now you should be getting your proper momentum bonuses to your units. They've also changed how the battle line ability is, and so again what that is the abilities that you get with your officers that get applied to the units that are in direct contact with them, or if you have a unit chain going on with units in between, then that will spread the bonuses over. So they pretty much effectively, it was somewhat hard to get surging abilities with the Astra Militarum, and now the pendulum is totally swung the other way, and it seems like the Astra Militarum are going to be really easily getting to surge now. So I don't know if this is going to push it one way or the other, but effectively what this does is the order battle line. Receiving an order gives plus 10 baseline momentum gains while you're under that influence. So effectively, if you're getting a kill, I think if I'm understanding this correctly, you're effectively just getting plus 10 momentum. So if you're killing a unit, that would be 10. I think you're going to get plus 20. Now, what I don't think is going to happen is I don't think it's per model in the squad, because that would just be absolutely ludicrous. So I hope they've taken that into consideration, and it's for like this 10 gets added to the end of the unit. Otherwise, when these guys are blowing up like Hormigons and things like that, they're just going to be able to surge on that single kill if that goes per model. So I can't imagine that's going to be the issue. And then there was also another issue with the battle lines where the buffs weren't always going and extending into the opponent's turn. So it's good that that's now happening. That way you're getting your plus increased damage, your accuracy, your HP, momentum gains, all those things when you're using your Overwatch fire. Apparently the Ogryn's inability to use the Valkyrie transport was not intended, so now you can load them into Valkyries, because in the past it was sometimes it would bug out and you weren't be able to do it. It looks like they still cannot be used in Chimeras though, so just be aware of that. Now they've really changed the Commissar a lot here, and I think a lot of this is good. So for the Commissar, your Emperor's Will, which is his battle line buff, it's now going to be giving plus 10% HP instead of the 5, so they're effectively doubling that buff, which is nice. And then with his Execute ability, I strongly agree with this. I thought this is how it should be the whole time, and in fact, if you've been watching my channel and seeing some of the conversations I've been having with other players, we've been going back and forth like, what would I do? And this is actually what my recommendation was, to make this actually a better ability, because before, if you executed, it would only affect the unit that you'd execute, but it's like you want to get those momentum gains going to your heavy weapons squad and your Ogryns, you know, things that are going to really do a lot of damage for you. So you're not going to sit there and want to blast one of them in the head and then drop your damage by 1/3 to get a slight damage increase with their surging ability. So now what you do is you can just use those puny Castellan guardmen around, or not Castellan, the Cadian guardsmen around you, and you can just sit there and shoot one of them in the head using the execute ability, and now it's got an AoE ability, which is nice. So pretty much anybody that's around him will get the momentum gains now. So that's really big. So that's definitely going to be nice. And then you can keep using the same unit. So if you have like one little guardsman, it's like if once this wears off, you can then execute another unit from that target and then activate it again. So you can do that. And then the show 'em steal is now, it's adding a ranged crit chance. So if that's the case, I'm curious to know if that's going to start applying to vehicles or not, because if it is, that's going to be huge for them to be the commissars to start buffing vehicles as well, in addition to the bonus HP. And then the cooldown has now been increased to 2 turns from 1. And then I don't know what it means by this where it says corrected the show them steal to use additive mass. I don't know if that means like when you were doing this, if you had other buffs on, it wasn't stacking appropriately. So I'm not quite sure what they mean when they say that. So with the Castellan now, the voice of leadership, which is her ability for the battle line, it now doubles the accuracy boost for that. So now the units are getting plus 10 accuracy instead of plus 5. So that's pretty huge. The Bring It Down ability now has its range increased to 5 tiles, so that's really nice, and the cooldown's been reduced to 2 turns. So effectively, you can sit there and keep her a little bit farther back, spam her big buffs, which are important, and have her start weakening other units. Now, just be aware that the effect you apply is only available on 1 turn, and it ends on the caster's turn, so it's not going to continue on to the following turn. So you want to make sure that you're getting all your damage dealt to whatever unit you're debuffing with the Break It Down and trying to get the kill. Now, the other thing that they did, and I think this is one of the suggestions I had too, is with the move, they created it as an AoE effect, so it's 1 tile around the Castellan, but it still has a 3-turn cooldown, and the effect only lasts for 1 turn. So I have mixed feelings about this. Like, part of me almost wonders, like, should it last for 2 turns because you don't have jump infantry, but at the same time, since it goes on vehicles, I don't want to have a bunch of tanks and Rogal Dorns and things like that getting +1 movement for 2 turns, because I think that's going to be way too powerful, especially if you start doing like aggressive Chimera play. So I'm not sure the best way. I think it's definitely a good idea that you can now have this as an AoE effect. So if you do bring one of these Castellans along, you can use it on the first turn and help get your guys spread out to wherever they need to be a little bit quicker. But you're still going to have issues, especially on the strategic command points, since you don't have any jump infantry, that there's going to be a lot of maps that without that jump infantry ability to overcome obstacles, you're going to always be a couple points behind on your strategic command maps. So they made pretty dramatic changes to the tank commander too. I don't know how I feel about this. Some I think are really good, and then the Blitz, I think they totally destroyed that ability. So maybe if you guys feel differently, let me know, but I really don't like what they did with the Blitz. So what they did is the Shock and Awe, which is again this guy's battle line ability. They've increased the bonus damage to 10% from 5%, so it's effectively doubled his damage buff, so that's huge. His battle cannon, in the past what people were having a lot of difficulty with is with the Leman, Russ, the Rogal, Dorn, the tank commander, is they had pretty decent minimum ranges. So then if you got them locked into melee, they effectively couldn't attack, and then you'd have to use you'd either have to force your guys out of movement to try and then take area of effect, and when you're driving away with a vehicle, that leaves you for rear attacks when you're trying to get away, so you get tons of damage dealt to you if you did that. Or you just use the Psyker to use his abilities to allow you to ignore the melee range, but now what the melee zone of control, I should say. But now what they've done is they just said, oh, well, we're just going to change the minimum range, so 1, so you can still shoot at 1, it's just you're going to have terrible accuracy because you're not at optimal range. So effectively now the minimum range has been changed to 1 with an optimal range of 5 and a max range of 9. That's how that works if you're unfamiliar. So the Pound 'em to the Dust ability has totally been reworked. So now what this does is, in the past it would allow you to take both your action points and then you get like 9 splash damage to your unit. So effectively you would just use your tank commander to squad wipe any sort of low to medium tier infantry when you'd be shooting, because you would get 3 shots but at 50% less damage. Now what they do is you apply this to another vehicle, and then they get plus 100% shots for all weapons for the nearby vehicle. So what you're really going to want to do with this is you're going to want to save this for something like the Rogal Dorn or your Leman Russ tank, something that's going to have all of its secondary and tertiary weapons, like the las cannon and the is it called the Spenson? I'm not sure what those side weapons are called. Weapons are, so like if you had your, let's say, a Vanquisher next to you, so instead of in the past, you give them Blitz and that would give you an extra AP, effectively you're going to apply the Pound 'em to Dust on there, and so then it's going to shoot twice, so you're going to get 2 shots. And then if they have, let's say, the plasma guns on there, it would be getting 2 attacks with the plasma guns followed up with another 2 attacks, is effectively doubling the shots. And then if it also had the las cannon set up, then you'd effectively shoot twice with the las cannon. So this can allow you to absolutely destroy whatever you're fighting if you have all 3 of those attacks set up here. So that's a huge buff here, and effectively you could use this to really help you surge pretty easily with getting double attacks. And then the question I wouldn't that I'm not sure about because I haven't played with this, but I would be suspicious since it sticks around for the whole turn. Let's say you get your double your main cannon attack, your side weapons, and then your las cannon, then you get to surge. The question is if you surge, then I assume you would get double main cannon attacks for a second time. And then if you had already gotten to the maximum amount, I assume that you could just use that momentum gains, and then with the other weapons, if you're firing again, you may end up being able to surge twice if you are fighting the right kind of units. So that's going to be huge, and people are definitely going to use that. Now, the ability I'm really disappointed with is the Blitz. So I think effectively what they did is because they made such changes to the Pound 'em to the Dust, they nerfed the Blitz ability. So now what effectively this does is it still takes an action point, as does the Pound 'em to the Dust. They both are action point abilities. But you apply it to a Leman Russ or a Rogal Dorn. When they get shot at, it gives them like a plus 10% chance to get grazes instead of full hits, so it gives them like a defensive bonus. And then it gives them the Blitz charge ability. So when I saw this when I was playing on a match, I thought, oh, maybe because it says I'll give them the Blitz ability, so I thought, oh, maybe that means that if it's a Rogal Dorn or a Leman Russ, that'll be the +1 action point for how the Blitz used to be. But that's not how it goes. What this Blitz charge ability is, it's effectively a variant of the Chimera's charge ability with the Dozer Blade. So effectively it'll just charge out of melee range, and then whatever unit it hits, it'll do pretty good damage as a splash, and then it'll do damage, lower amounts of damage to anybody it charges through. So I think effectively what that's supposed to be utilized as is a way for you to get out of melee range with a vehicle without having to just move, or if there's one unit in front of you that you just want to kill, you can give them the Blitz ability, and then it gives you that melee attack to affect them. But I haven't played around with it, but yeah, I can't see maybe situationally that could be useful, but I think for the most part I can't foresee myself using the Blitz ability much anymore. So that was a pretty dramatic change. I was not expecting these. I was kind of wondering if maybe they were going to make it like an AoE just damage buff or something like that, but no, they just totally reworked how that works. So I'm definitely curious to play around with that a little bit. And so for our Leman Russ sponsons, that's the term I was trying to think of. Effectively what they've done is they've halved the cost for every sponson weapon, so now it's the same as the tank commander. So you're going to save a bunch of resources that way. Your Leman Russ points, so to bring a Leman Russ, it's been reduced to 250. It was 260 originally. And some of you may be thinking like, well, because you're going to see this being a common situation here, is they reduce the cost on a lot of vehicles, and you're going to be like, well, what's the point of that? And the reason they ended up doing these is because they increase the cost of your infantry, as we'll get to shortly. So I think that's how they decided to do this. Now, a huge buff to the Leman Russes is the las cannon cooldown has now been dropped to 2 turns from 3, and its range has also been changed. So in the past you had that pretty significant minimum range, whereas now it's 1 minimum range, 5 optimal range, up to 8 distance that you can shoot at. So this is significantly going to increase the damage of all Leman Russ tanks against vehicles, so that should be helpful, because I think other than using your Vanquisher, a lot of people were having a lot of frustration dealing with a heavy mechanized force, whereas this is going to effectively increase their damage by 33%, assuming you keep them alive against vehicles, because now you're going to have that las cannon going on. The plasma cannon, which is the sponson secondary weapon, its range has also been changed, so it got rid of the minimum range being more than just 1. So now you can shoot at units that are adjacent to you for the optimal range of 4 and the maximum range of 8. So that's a significant boost there. So you can use this on your other tanks here, especially the Vanquisher. The Demolisher, it had range changes as well, so it has a minimum range of 1, optimal range of 3, maximum range of 5, and they buffed the armor piercing ability up to 6 from 5, so that should help it do a little more damage against heavy infantry with the splash and other units that it sometimes had a little bit of trouble getting through, because really you're supposed to use this as your way to clear out full squads with its 5 splash, and so this should definitely help with that. And then the Vanquisher got some much needed changes as well. Before, the minimum range was just so high that you could potentially use all your movement to try to get away from a unit, and then you still wouldn't be able to shoot into them because of the minimum range. But now they've changed it to 3, so as long as you have your 4 movement, you should be able to move the tank and then be able to fire on units. Now the accuracy will still be difficult because it has an optimal range of 7 with the maximum range of 10, but that should be good, because before the minimum range on that definitely was not good, with it being at what I think it was like 4 or 5, and that just made it really hard to get guys to be able to shoot into it. So that's a pretty good change for the Vanquisher here. I don't know. I see why they got the minimum ranges on the other one. I think that'll definitely help players out, and it's also probably going to help the tanks as well, because you just don't have good units to hold the front line, in my opinion. So I think these are probably good changes here. So the Rogal Dorn, they've effectively made it so you can choose the pulverizer over the Gatling cannon, and it'll be for free. So you just gotta decide what kind of units you're going to be fighting for an enemy faction to know which weapon you want to bring, and that's for free. It also reduced the cost for the multi-melta down to 10 points, so I suspect you'll be seeing a lot more people bringing that weapon out now that it's reduced in cost. The twin battle cannon range has now been changed again, so its minimum range is now 1 with an optimal range of 5 and a maximum range of 9. The heavy bolters got a buff, so now they have 28 attacks instead of 24. The oppressor, which is the other cannon variant that you have, its ranges have changed as well, so now you have a minimum range of 1, an optimal range of 6, and a maximum range of 9. And the pulverizer has had its AP increase, so now it should be better against medium and heavy infantry because you have that 5 armor piercing instead of the 4, so that's good as well. The Sentinel got some rework, so it reduced the cost of it by 15, so that's nice. The plasma cannon got a huge buff, so now again people were struggling with the lack of a good frontline tank unit, such as a Bulgrin. For whatever reason, they decided not to put those in. So now they've effectively given everybody minimum ranges to 1 almost, except for the Vanquisher. And so the plasma cannon is the same. So it's got a minimum range of 1, optimal range of 4 with a maximum range of 8. And effectively now, instead of having a 1 tack situation with some splash, you've now got 2 shots at 50 damage. So that's a huge damage output increase to the Sentinel, because those still have splash damage, is my understanding. So that'll be significant damage to things like crisis suits, cell suits, Terminators. So really, I think that's going to make the plasma cannon be a very viable option now. Whereas before it was like it was good, but you're paying a lot of resources for it. So now with the reduced cost, I think that's going to be a much more attractive option, especially with double shots here. Now, the other thing that was reworked, because it definitely was expensive for what it is, and I still think it's kind of expensive compared to, the heavy flamer allowing you to just totally annihilate low-tier infantry, and then having 2 range, and now the armored sentinel is going to have this really great plasma cannon. So it's like the multi-laser has been reworked, so now you can use your harassing fire on up to 3 adjacent enemies. So if you have 3 units together, you just run this guy up, you use the harassing fire, and then you can just select 3 units that are side next to each other. Unfortunately, they still need to be adjacent to each other, so it's not like the what is that guy called? The Necron dual pistol user that has his spreading fire that he can just change within to 3 different units within the area. I kind of wish it was that way for this instead of adjacent, because you're still, the multi-laser range, yes, it's changed here, but the harassing fire, it used to last for multiple turns, and now it only lasts 1 turn. So I think if you could just use 3 enemies and split it up, that would be a better way of doing it. But I suppose this was just easier way of coding for them. So it definitely makes it an interesting unit, but I would much rather just be able to select additional units or to increase the multi-laser damage a little bit more, so it can do better damage against medium infantry, because right now you can do like so damage to medium infantry. It cannot really do much against vehicles, and it's actually pretty good against low tier infantry because it has so many shots, so you tend to be able to wipe out multiple units. But again, for all the costs, I mean, the harassing fire is definitely a good ability, and I'm glad that you can give it to 3 adjacent, but I wish there was just a little bit more spread there. Because effectively what you're doing is you're reducing their movement and accuracy for 1 turn, and in exchange you're going to do minimal damage with the multi-laser because the damage, it fires fewer shots, and it has a damage debuff, I think if I remember correctly, to the Armored Sentinel when it uses that attack. So the Chimera, the multi-laser, has its range changed as well, so now it's a 148. The Run 'em Over has a minimum range of 2. It was 1. I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to have to play around with it, because what it used to do is if you were at a range of 1, you could still just attack with the melee dozer blade, which didn't really make clear to most players. So I assume that's still there, and you're just not going to be able to use the Run 'em Over ability at a range of 1. I get it, because it's a charge attack, so like you shouldn't be able to charge at adjacent unit because no other unit can do it. But at the same time, we'll see. And then they fixed the issue with the charge ability, which is very good, because both the Chimera and the Ogrins, what was happening is the damage to whatever unit they were ending their attack on wasn't getting the damage applied to them. And that was a huge issue, because the whole point with these charge abilities is whatever unit you attack last is the one that's going to be taking the most damage. And so by you not being able to apply that damage onto units, it's like, what the hell? That totally nerfed their whole ability and just gets passed. So I'm glad they finally fixed that. So I'm definitely curious to see how the Chimera plays now. I'm glad they fixed this issue here, and I'm curious to see. I assume, like I said, the Dozer Blade will still allow you to do the melee attacks. So you can still hit units at a range of 1. If you can't hit the units that are adjacent to you and you have to use the multi-laser at the reduced accuracy, that's going to be an absolute shit change. But I'll play around and see what happens when I get to that unit on the faction unit review. So the Cadian shock troops had pretty significant changes. I think they're all very good changes, so I'm happy that this happened. So effectively, because they're being buffed, the cost has been increased by 5, which I think is reasonable. What it effectively does is now both loadouts have access to the frag grenades, which I think is great. Because their frag grenades with the armor piercing of 1 are kind of the weaker grenades, but neither one of these, even with these changes, can swipe out like a scarab swarm or anything with their regular either melee or ranged attacks. So if you have this frag grenade, that will allow you to do that. So that's going to be huge. So I'm happy that's there. And then because the melee loadout is so superior, they increased the cost for that. So now if you're bringing the shock troops, are going to cost 45 instead of 35. So it's like, yeah, but you're getting an extra, you now have grenades and the melee attack. So I don't know. I think it makes sense. They might be a little bit pricey now, but we'll see. I have to play around more with them because the lasgun now has range changes, so it's 136, and it now has attacks, 4 attacks per model with 4 damage at an accuracy of 80. But they still only have an armor piercing of 1. So I think because they're going to increase the base damage here, they should actually be able to do some damage to like the Space Marines and some, medium tier infantry. It's not going to be a lot. It's probably going to be like 5 to 10 damage per model.
but it'll at least do some damage, I think, since this has been changed. And then if you bring the bayonet out, then, you know, obviously your range drops a little bit, so the accuracy drops down to 65% from the 80. But what you're effectively getting is you get the melee bayonet, which is actually a pretty decent unit, pretty decent damage, and they've also increased the armor piercing up to 4. So that should allow them to do pretty decent damage against medium infantry and even some vehicles, especially if you can start getting other buffs in there. There's no cooldown on the bayonet. It said that there was a cooldown, but there never was, so they just got rid of that. Now, this is an issue I'm a little bit worried about. Is the guardsmen were always very easy to kill, and now it looks like they're going to double the amount of momentum you gain when you wipe out the Cadians shock troops. So I'm not sure how this correlates to Gretchen and Scarabs, if they also get 2 momentum for each model that's killed there. If they do, that seems reasonable. But if not, effectively what this is you're going to be penalized by bringing a lot of these shock troops, because, you know, all of a sudden you're having, what, 9, 10 models there, and you're going to have your death company or your assault squad or whatever flamer you have there and kill multiple units. And so that means you're going to be getting upwards of 40 momentum plus more if you have any sort of momentum gain bonuses being applied. So I think this is effectively just going to be feeding crazy amounts of momentum to your enemies, especially the Tyranids. So if anything, this should allow the Tyranids to get some pretty decent buffs against the Astra Militarum. But if you're fighting a Astra Militarum faction that brings a lot of infantry, so I'm a little bit worried about doubling the momentum gains. Like I said, if that's equivalent to Scarabs and Gretchen when they get killed, then fine. I guess that's what we'll just have to do, because that will make them equivalent. But if it's not, then I think this is going to be a little bit of an issue here. So the Kasserkin, I'm still not super in love with these guys. I was really hoping they were going to be reworked more than this. But effectively what they did is they doubled the evasion. The hotshot las gun now has ranges of 1, 3, and 7. Each model has 7 attacks with 5 damage at 90 accuracy, armor piercing of 3. And all units now will shoot a single enemy model instead of spreading the shots. I think that's a huge improvement here. What I was finding is they would spread damage and they would do okay damage, but because each model would be shooting a different model of the enemy, they would like get every unit down to 1/3 or 1/2 of their health, but then I still had a full roster. So now they should actually be able to be getting some kills. I really was hoping what was going to happen is with the changes, they were going to make it so like the hot shot was going to be increased armor piercing, so you could use that as like an anti-medium infantry and vehicle damage dealer, things like that. So I really was hoping that they were going to increase the armor piercing, and then what they would do is they would just increase the amount of shots with the volley gun and make it just more of a general purpose cleanup crew. And unfortunately, that's not really what the situation is. What they effectively did is for the volley gun, you know, you've got a range of 1, 4, 8. So now it has a little more range. It has a little more shots at the same amount of damage, same accuracy, same armor piercing. And they increase the cost by 10 points to bring out the hot shot. They moved unit accuracy bonus to weapons for consistency with other units. They say there's no impact on the game for that, so I'm not quite sure what the significance of that is. And they also nerfed HP to the Melta mine, so effectively anything that just fires one shot at it that lands a hit will get to destroy it. I don't know if I totally agree with that, because spore mines, you know, they have what, 20, 30 health. So why does the Melta mine have to have only 1 HP? You know, the whole point of the thing is you're paying to have this amazing mine that you can drop on positions to get blown up. And yes, it's stealth, but only for 3 turns. So then they can just easily shoot it, and then it's just like a non-issue. So I don't know why they decided to change the HP there, but they did. And I mean, even at 10 HP, most units are going to be able to kill that. So it's not a huge thing. So for the Ogrins, they are now able to be in the Valkyrie transports reliably. They had a slight HP buff to each unit, so now each one has 160. And again, just like the charge for the Chimera that we talked about, they fixed the Furious charge bugging out. So hopefully their chargeability now, which is kind of their main claim to fame here, should be working appropriately. So hopefully that'll be the case. So for the heavy weapon squad, they changed the las cannon. So again, just like everything else, because people are having trouble with the minimum ranges, the las cannon now has a range of 158. They nerfed the accuracy down by 5, so now it's 60 from 65. The fall off will be 6 per tile. That's not optimal. They will now be shooting at a single model instead of spreading the shots. I actually kind of liked that these guys were spreading their shots because it allowed them to do more damage against medium and heavy infantry. And then if they'd be fighting things like a vehicle or a single unit, then obviously they just use their shot there. But I guess for consistency, that's why they did it. But I'm a little sad that that was the effect. And it says remove cooldown. I assume what it means when it says that is it remove the cooldown when you're using the because you can surge the entrench ability. So I'm hoping it means that they got rid of that. And then the autocannon, they reworked this. I still think it's going to be kind of a shit weapon because with the las cannon and the missile launcher being much better, but I'll play around with it after these changes. So what they effectively did is change the range, so it's a 158. The accuracy as well has been nerfed down to 60 from 65, but the base attacks per model has been increased by 1, so now each unit will shoot 3 instead of 2, and it'll have the fall off from multiple range being 6. They too will now start to focus fire on a single unit. I think that's good for these guys because with their amount of attacks and damage, that'll make sure that they can get some kills because for the autocannon, you know, you want to be getting model kills with these guys here. That's how they're supposed to be utilized, and then having that splash damage as well. So we'll see how this works. Hopefully maybe that'll make them a little more viable. But at the same time, they then nerfed the pour it on, which is the using up your setup stacks. And I assume the reason for that being is just with the amount of attacks going in here, if they had it the way it was before, they were just getting way too many attacks and then they were just way too powerful. But we'll see. Like I said, I'll have to play around with it. But now the pour it on only adds 1 shot per 2 stacks to set it up because you can have a max of 6 instead of 1 per. So you're effectively doubling the amount of shots they do with their regular attacks, and you're having their pour it on amount of shots by 3. So we'll see. And then pour it on's cooldown has gone to 2 turns instead of the 1, so you can't just sit there and spam it every turn to end up getting those additional attacks. So maybe this is supposed to be remove the cooldown on the focus fire. That way they can get a little more bonus damage. I'm not quite sure. They don't specify, but now that I see that the pour it on cooldown's changed here, I wonder if there's supposed to be something like that was changed. And then the missile launcher, effectively, the accuracy is just 60. I think it was 65 before in the fall off. So it's just they made the accuracy consistent here. For the Psyker, they've changed how this works. He now has 2 melee attacks for each attack instead of just the 1. So that'll be good. So that'll allow him to at least consistently get some damage. Then when they cast Night Shroud, you'll now get 20% momentum because and myself and everybody else was getting really frustrated that they have these amazing abilities, but it was just incredibly difficult for the Psyker to actually get enough momentum to be able to surge. So now by giving them some momentum when casting, that should help them be able to surge and use some better abilities. So again, Night Shroud, you get plus 20 momentum, and then it disabled the edge case where, because this is supposed to allow you to not have to suffer any sort of zone of control and ignore ranged overwatch shots and things like that. And what was happening is people who had pistols were still able to get the reaction fire, and usually it's not a big deal if it's a vehicle, but if things like an Inferno pistol or a plasma pistol are shooting into you, especially if it's a rear attack, that's a big deal. So they fixed that, so that's good. And now you don't have it at the start with Planet Supremacy. And then the mental shackles, the cooldown has been increased 3 turns from 2 turns. Again, by casting it, you get 20 momentum. The accuracy debuff has been increased to -30, so that's huge. I'm really happy to see that. Apparently, it wasn't being applied if there's multiple debuffs on there, so now that should be fixed, and again, it's locked. Now, they really did change how the Basilisk works now, so I'm very curious to see if they're going to be a viable option, because really nobody liked them the way they were before. They had some very interesting ideas, but it just didn't work out in practice given how terrible their accuracy was. So I think they made some changes here to hopefully make them quite a bit better. And so I'm very curious to see how this has worked, because after reading this through, I can definitely see that this could be very powerful on like a map like the Bridges or other maps where you're going to have really tight grouped together clumped together units, I should say. And the reason for that is because their abilities have been reworked. So the steady aim has been updated. So now what this means is when you use this ability to make an attack with the Earthshaker, you get plus 10 accuracy for every movement point that the Basilisk has left unspent. So that should be good to just help increase their accuracy. The barrage ability has been totally changed, so I'm not sure how this is going to work. I think it should be great, but I'm not sure, because what I was getting really frustrated with is the Basilisk actually can do pretty good damage, but if they land one attack and then the following turn you want to use the barrage ability, if it just happened to land that first attack, then you wouldn't get your other 2 shots because you killed the unit. And you would actually want to just be shooting in, to have those other 2 shots go into a square that doesn't have any units, because if that happens, then you have the chance of spreading their attacks, and any tiles that their shots are spread over into, you get the full attacks, meaning not only do you have full damage, but you also have a full splash. And so effectively, if you killed the unit you were trying to barrage on the very first shot, then you nullified their damage. So to mitigate that now, you don't select a specific enemy to shoot, you select a tile. And so then you'll get those 3 shots onto that tile. And then apparently it doesn't use the weapon's accuracy, which I don't quite understand how they're calculating this. So instead it just fires 3 shots in a 3x3 area, and it sounds like it has a equal chance of hitting any of those squares. So if there's units in there, you can attack anybody that's grouped together. So that's why on something like the bridge, where you may have a lot of guys grouped together, if you can just set up these barrage abilities with your multiple basilisks, you could potentially wipe out tons of infantry that are grouped together. So that could be actually a very interesting ability. Now, the artillery targeting has also been reworked, so it gives a buff now. So when firing the Basilisk, each time it deals damage with an aimed earthquake or shock. So instead of just, because what's happening is the steady aim, you're getting increased buffs as long as you're not moving. So then this should help you get additional accuracy with that, but your stacks are lost on movement, just like the setup. And then unfortunately the barrage does not add stacks, which makes sense. I mean, if you're hitting 3, then getting 3 stacks on there, that would significantly increase their accuracy to probably a ludicrous amount, and it would probably make them too powerful. So they've just totally reworked this. So I'm definitely going to see how this works. And then they just did some minor changes. So they increased the firing rate of the multi-laser, which is good because it fired really slow. They increased the speed of all las weapons, which is good because they were definitely very anemic. They changed the supercharge ability with the Armed Sentinel. I guess I didn't really notice that, so we'll see how that works. And then they updated the default armies for the skirmish and planetary supremacy, so that should be good. The other thing I thought, did I not talk about it? I thought the Rogal, no, I saw it somewhere, I don't remember where it is, but what was happening is the Demolisher and certain Leman Russ variants, their heavy bolter shots were really slow, and so they fixed that, so that will no longer be the case. And then they also made some minor changes to a couple other factions here just for the sake of completeness. So the Gretchen got nerfed, so they had a ground blast accuracy of 90, and now it's down to 75. They really nerfed the Necron Scarab Swarm ability, which surprises me. So because if I understand this, this is a huge change for them. So what's happening is when you're using your command point ability, which is your tier 1 ability with the Necrons, you would summon 2 Scarabs, and then they would move in and they would do like a charge attack. And then you could then move them around and do a second attack with both of those things. So you'd have 4 attacks effectively with the Scarabs in 1 turn. And that would allow them to effectively kill most HQ infantry units, assuming they had the option to doing back attacks. But if I'm understanding how this works now, it looks like the Scarab swarms that are summoned have -1 action. So I don't think they're going to have double attacks here, if I'm understanding how this works. So if that's the case, that's going to really suck. And then they still do their charge. So I'm not quite sure why they decided to do this. I mean, yes, it was a very, very powerful ability, especially against the Tau and your any infantry commander units. It would definitely be a nightmare. But you still have a tier 2 ability with the Space Marines where they can summon in their assault squad, which will do a charge attack. You can then move, use their increased damage attack, and then attack again for a second attack. And that allows you to do even more damage to snipe out enemy commanders. So I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I mean, yes, it's a very, very powerful, frustrating ability. But yeah, if my understanding is that's a huge nerf. And then the Scarab Swarms, they added extra explosive damage if you use the self-destruct protocol. I hope that actually does something now, because in the past it did like nothing, and so there was no one would ever use it because it didn't make any sense to do it. So I'm curious to see if that's actually going to make it viable to kill low-tier swarms. Like, you know, you have some Scarabs that are almost dead, and you can go in there and wipe out a Gretchen squad or you know, Cadian, something like that. I could definitely see that being useful, so I'm curious to see how this will work. And then they just did a couple of bug fixes as well. So graphic settings weren't saving. They fixed the issue with the Astra Militarum, whereas if you had extra action points that you weren't using, they weren't suffering as many momentum penalties. So now they are. So now they're suffering -20 momentum. Again, they fixed the crit chance and the graze chance for the momentum not working properly, as we talked about at the front or the start of this. So hopefully this will definitely help, because I noticed specifically the tank commander seems to graze way more than I would expect. So hopefully that'll fix that issue. They did some Overwatch issues. There was a bug if you summoned the Valkyrie that it would keep like zooming around and do stuff like that. And it was really annoying because it was actually pretty noisy. So that shouldn't be the case anymore. They gave a little more better description for the Valkyrie. It reduced, speaking of which, they reduced the noise of the engines. Like I said, it could just blow things out. Okay, here we go. And then it fixed the slow firing heavy bolters with the Demolisher cannon when you're using that. So I think these overall should be some very good changes. I'm still not sure about the Caster cannon. I think they're still going to be kind of a wet noodle unit. I was really hoping they were going to make some better changes there, but overall I think this is going to make the Astra Militarum much easier to use. I was finding a lot of people were getting very, very frustrated with them because they're having trouble just keeping things within the right range. I think it made the Vanquisher cannon just way better now. The Rogal Dorms are going to be a much more attractive option. You know, they're expensive, but they're damn good, and now they're even better with the better side weapons. I think the Armored Sentinels are going to have some better play. You know, I think I'm good. I'm happy with a lot of these changes. I don't know about the tank commanders, pound them to dust and blitz them changes. Those seem kind of weird. But overall, I think these are mostly good changes. I do have a little bit of fear, though, with the momentum changes, that it's going to make these guys just surge like a mother. And that might be difficult with all the attacks that they can potentially do. But let's see, because I definitely felt that they were a very weak faction that could be countered by a lot of other areas, because you just don't have the option to have a real diversified force. I mean, people know what you're bringing when you bring the Astra Militarum. So hopefully with these buffs, it'll allow you to get enough points for your tanks to help them pay for themselves before they get sniped down by your opponents. So again, the unit roster videos going forward with going through each faction's units, they will have the updated the patch notes with the units and the reviews here, unlike the one that was released yesterday, because I just wasn't at home to be able to re-record a video and get some of those new changes put out. But the videos going forward will have those changes. So thanks for watching. I hope you're enjoying these videos. If you are, please give my channel a like and subscribe. Garrett June posts more content for you. Have a great day.